welcome to everybody wherever you are in the world. This is the fifth webinar in this series organised by the World Access to Higher Education Network. My name is David Locke. I am Secretary General of the Magna Charta Observatory, which is very pleased to be associated with WAHEN for this series and a number of other activities as well. Just a word before we start. The Magna Charta Observatory, Universitatum, is a document that's now been signed by over 1,000 universities worldwide. It's a statement of fundamental values which they subscribe to, which includes academic freedom, autonomy, research-linked teaching, and so on. But there's one sentence in it which is particularly relevant for our association, and that is, education is a human right, a public good, and should be available to all. Universities recognise that learning is a lifelong activity, with tertiary education as one part of a continuum. Within that one part, universities serve diverse learners at all stages of their lives. WAHEN has done a huge amount to spread the message of wider access and promote more success of people who come from diverse backgrounds into higher education. Our theme this afternoon, uncovering strategies for inclusive student success. We have 4 speakers. They will each speak for about 15 minutes, and then we will have a period of discussion and questions at the end. And to start, we have John Gardner, co-founder and executive chair, a distinguished professor emeritus and senior fellow of the Gardner Institute for Excellence in Higher Education. And John is going to talk about the graduate student experience, inviting a needed expansion of student success focus beyond undergraduate students to include graduate students. John.
Thank you, Professor Locke. That is what I'm going to do. And good day to everyone, as David said, wherever you are. I am here to talk about something that we call now in the United States the graduate student experience. And this is an outgrowth of what began in the United States and has become now over decades a global movement that is called the first-year experience, which applies to undergraduates. The main thesis I want to argue this morning is that this focus on beginning tertiary education students and their success or lack of it is necessary, but it is unintentionally and arbitrarily discriminatory because it neglects the vast majority of tertiary education students who are beyond the first year. So with respect to my own country, we have approximately 20 million students enrolled in tertiary education, of whom 4 million are postgraduate students. But they are not included in the discussion in the United States and elsewhere in the world that I know of under the rubric of what we're calling student success. For the past 5 years, I have been a partner with Dr. Barry O'Connor, whom you're going to hear from shortly, in organizing a nonprofit voluntary working group known as the Global Forum on Student Success. That language is only meant to focus on undergraduate students. We have not been until now talking about graduate students. So one of the things we know somewhat anecdotally is that we have a very high attrition rate of graduate students in the United States, students who start but who do not finish. And the reason we know this more anecdotally is there's no central governmental requirement that we report and share those outcomes data. A few institutions do this voluntarily. Most of them do not. They do not want to make this information public because it's not complementary. But we know it's occurring, and that's what we're trying to address in this work. So, what do I mean by the graduate student experience? I'm going to, and by the way, I meant to ask David, if you'll give me a high sign at 13 or 14 minutes, okay? Because I've got to meet my commitment to Barry O'Connor. Okay, so what do we mean when we call the graduate student experience? Well, I've given this a lot of thought. I'm the architect of the first year experience movement, which I started in 1982 and brought to the United Kingdom in 2000, in 1986, where in the United Kingdom, for example, a group of educators organized something known as the European First Year Experience Conference Series. They're celebrating their 20th anniversary this June, and that is an extension and elaboration and an end to the colonization by the United States of this movement in the United Kingdom. We were holding American organized meetings from 1986 until our British friends picked this up in 2006. Now, this new focus on graduate students, I want to give you a definition, and I'm going to pass a basic literacy test because Barry doesn't think I really know how to read English, and to give you a working definition of what I mean by the graduate student experience. This concept, it is a concept, it's an educational concept, it's a philosophical concept, because we think that any reform work that strives to improve anything has got to have a philosophy. So this is a philosophy. It embodies a core set of values, and it implies a set of activities that are comprehensive. And it's designed to direct to the experiences that postgraduate students are having, many of which are positive, but some of those experiences are negative. A lot of what they encounter in graduate work is intentional and designed by their university. But much of what they encounter is unintentional and undesigned and undesirable. So we're looking at everything that is in the curriculum, their formal academic requirements, but we're also looking at their lives outside the curriculum, what often we call in the States their co-curricular lives. Now, this concept of the graduate student experience is an aspirational one. It's optimistic. It's positive. It believes that we can perform better and that students will respond to our efforts to make those experiences better. And it embodies a belief fundamentally that whatever we're doing with postgraduate students, it should emphasize, here's some key notions, imagine this, respect for these students, a respect for their dignity, a desire to treat them fairly, a desire to treat them, not supposed to use this word in the United States, equitably. This embodies a philosophy for a kind of proper treatment of graduate students. And we're looking at certain outcomes that would be measurable. We want to achieve improvements in retention, persistence rates of graduate students, the completion of their programs, whatever their intentions were in that regard. We want to see an improvement in their employment opportunities. And we want to encompass a holistic view of student support that includes the intellectual, the personal, the social, the physical, the spiritual, if you will, meaning the ultimate values that these people live by, their vocational goals, and all the other human aspects of developing as human beings. Okay. Now, that has not been the philosophy that has characterized overwhelmingly graduate education. And in efforts to improve the graduate student experience, this has been a hard conversation to launch because most of us involved in this, we're looking at the way we've always known things. And it's a very, very great challenge to change what you've always known and what you accept as just the way it is. It was that way for me, and I have to pass it on in order to maintain the standards. Okay, now I contend that this whole view of students is both their lack of needing this kind of attention is unfair. I think it's I think it's a false assumption that they don't need more attention. And as I said earlier, this focus in student success only on undergraduate students is discriminatory. In my country, it neglects 4 million students. As the American philosopher and humorist once said, pretty soon you're talking about real money here. Now, the larger national interests are that it is in the respective interests of all the nations that are represented in this session that we have a robust approach to graduate education. It's necessary for our economy, our healthcare system, the national defense of every one of these nations, and the overall quality of life in all these countries. And from the American point of view, I'm aware that much of the rest of the world looks at our models for graduate education, many of which were borrowed from Europe, as a world leader. And right now, at least the ranking indications are that we are losing that position very, very rapidly. I've mentioned that we have limited empirical evidence. Until about a year ago, the federal government was collecting data on the progress of undergraduate students. We could report that for every one of the 4,000 U.S. undergraduate students. We cannot do that for graduate students. We never had that requirement for our graduate students. Now, a big picture here, I don't know how this compares in your countries, is that our undergraduate enrollments as a nation are declining, and the graduate enrollments are increasing, in part because institutions are rushing to replace undergraduates with graduate students. And the main reason for that is we can charge more money for the graduate students. And so there is a plethora of there are a plethora of new graduate programs that some of us euphemistically refer to as cash cows, okay? Not a flattering metaphor. And we know from our own history, when we admitted vast numbers of students to undergraduate education as a result of the Civil Rights Movement and the Act of Congress in 1965 called the Higher Education Act, that when you admit students to universities whom universities are not prepared for, those students don't function as well. And that's, of course, now what's happening in all our countries. We are admitting graduate students that don't look like the graduate students that we've always been admitting, who by and large looked like me. Okay? So this means that what we're finding in our country is that graduate education, the graduate students, are increasingly bringing with them the problems and challenges that they faced in undergraduate students. They don't leave them behind. We also have a movement in the United States called College Parallel, which means that we're offering in secondary school, university level courses and credits, which means that hundreds of thousands of our students now are earning baccalaureate degrees at younger ages, and they don't feel ready to go into the workplace. And so they're going to graduate school because the graduate degree has been the next must-have credential. Now, the organization we have in my country system, and I suspect yours, is one that is vastly bifurcated, meaning those educators, the administration, the faculty, the professoriate, the staff, the ones who work with graduate students, by and large, don't work with undergraduate students. And so we have totally separate organizational structures. We have deans of so-called graduate schools, but they are administrative functionaries, and they're not the real deans who have the real power and the real resources, because the real deans control the academic credit work that the graduate students do. So what you have then is a system, and I'm going to, might as well just get my most important point across. You have a system where the undergraduate educators are by and large not talking to or working with the graduate educators. And if this situation is to be changed, we have to talk about it. And like many of our problems, we think they're going to get better, or at least not be as visible, if we don't talk about them. So what I and a number of colleagues are doing is we're trying to get more discussion of the graduate student needs. I want to give you a quick enumeration of what we see as the needs for, I've got to find a list here. You all never lose anything. Okay, well, I'll just rattle them off from memory. We find that graduate students are greatly in need of improved advising from their faculty. They need to be oriented to the university. They're very much like first-year students. They don't know how graduate education is organized. They don't know how the hidden curriculum, the hidden rules play out. They don't know what the unspoken norms are. They need help from fellow graduate student peers. Surprisingly, we're finding many of our graduate students do not yet write proficiently. They don't have sufficient background in basic statistical skills or other languages. They need a great deal, I'm sorry to say, of remedial work. They need introduction into how to use university libraries and technology facilities. We're also finding that many of our students are hungry. They don't have enough to eat. And it's very hard to learn when you don't have enough to eat. A very large problem is the mental health of these students, and we're struggling to address that. Many of them need childcare support, which they didn't need as undergraduate. And because, unlike you, oh, I envy you, we do not have, okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from David here. We don't have universal health care, so many of them need attention in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, I think probably I've said enough. In summary, I'm inviting, hoping that we will generate anything approaching the worldwide conversation of undergraduate student success by looking at graduate student success. And there's a group of us that have the first ever major book on this subject coming out this year, which we hope will be a catalyst for further discussion. I would love to hear from some of you about what you're doing to pay more attention to graduate students. Thank you very much, Ms. Breen, for making my participation possible.
Well, thank you, John. You raised a number of very important points during that session, including the students' own involvement in their experience. You drew out some differences between undergraduate and graduate students, and it might be good to return to some of those. You also drew out, I think, some very valuable administrative points. That's not to devalue them. If anything, it's the other way, and that's about transparency and reporting openly, and generally ensuring that both types of students are really integrated into the experience that they have. Look forward to picking up some of those issues in discussion. And now we cross the pond to Ireland and to Cathy McLoughlin, who is Head of Access at Dublin City University. And Cathy is going to talk about how a financially sustainable internship program can support social mobility for underrepresented student groups. Cathy, over to you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Imogen, for that invitation today. Just to say, I have been drafted in to cover for my colleague, Fiona. So apologies if I'm not quite as smooth as Fiona would have been within this presentation. So just checking there, I suppose that everybody can see this presentation. It should be loading there. So yes, so just to give you an insight, we are based in the north side of Dublin, which traditionally would have some very, very disadvantaged and socioeconomically challenged areas. So just give you a little idea of our university and the size of us. So we have 20,000 students, both undergrad and postgraduate. We have 5 faculties across 3 campuses on the north side of Dublin. And as a relatively young university, we've about 100,000 alumni at this point. So just to give you a little bit of how we're doing. So we've been rated as the #1 university in Ireland in the Times Higher Education Top 100 Under 50. We're graded in the world's top 100 young universities as well, in the top 50. And I suppose one part of the thing that we're probably quite proud of is that we've been rated number 24 in the world for reducing inequality, again by the Times Education. And we place a huge store on employability of our graduates. And so we're rated number 23 in the world in our graduate students' employability. And I'll come back to this because it's really something that the university has set its stall on. And it places a huge importance on the fact that it's not just enough to bring students in and give them a good education, but we have to ensure that they can then maximize that education and get good quality employment. So just to give a little overview, so we have an access program here in the university, which is our access program in the Irish context. This is targeted at young people under 23 years of age who generally come from groups affected by socioeconomic and economic disadvantage. Here in the university, we became a university in 1990, and some very far-sighted people then basically set up an access program as the first intake of students into this university. And we now have I suppose we have the first and probably the largest program still within the country. As of this current academic year, we have 922 students under 23 years of age on undergraduate degrees. I'm very fortunate in that the university ring fences 10% of places on all undergraduate programs for me here in this university. And I'm allowed reduce the academic requirements for students to come on the programs, because we're all very much aware that if people are facing greater challenges in their secondary school education, it's going to affect their performance in the end of secondary school examinations. But that should not be an impediment to them then coming through onto third level education. So, and this is quite an interesting statistic going back to what our speaker earlier was talking about in terms of students coming on and their persistence within the university. And I suppose one of the statistics we're very proud of here on the program, which I run, is that based on our 2020-21 intake, 87% of those students completed their degree on time. Traditionally, undergraduate degree programs in Ireland are either 3 or 4 years duration. So it means that 80% of students completed that degree on target. And we know that statistic will increase over 90% when we allow for students who are maybe completing at a slightly lower rate. Now, we're also very aware that financial barriers are a huge issue for students. So any student who comes into our program is granted an immediate €800 bursary as a minimum starting point. We then have other options in terms of increasing that sum based on individual needs. But that figure is very important given what I'm going to talk about in this later presentation. So I suppose we set up a program in 2019 called Access to the Workplace. And I suppose what it was based on was the idea that equality of access to education does not equal equality of outcome. So just because you've been given access doesn't mean that you're coming out with the same outcomes as your peers. So what we learned was that students from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds earn less than their affluent peers 9 months after graduation. Same degree, same academic outcomes, but they're earning less. And that was from statistics in 2019, 2021. And our aim is to change that. We want to make sure that there is no earnings gap. So what are we doing to do that, and how are we challenging it? So we set up what we call is quite an innovative solution. So we set up a summer internship program to support the employability and social mobility of undergraduate degrees in our university. It benefits access students and neurodivergent students because research tells us that people who are neurodivergent are also challenged within the workplace. And these are priority groups identified in the Irish National Access Plan 2022 to 2028. So the government named these as priority groups for universities to work with. Our internships are hosted by companies that make a philanthropic donation to DCU. So basically, we've worked and we've built relationship with companies, very high profile, very well-known companies, that basically, if they're going to take a student for the summer, they will make a financial donation to our access program, which we then pay out as part of our bursary system to our access students. All placements must be paid, and the shortest duration we will accept is 4 weeks, running up to 12 weeks. Sometimes those go a little longer if the student and the companies both so desire.
Cathy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your slide deck seems to have stuck on the opening page.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Can you? If I do it this way, can you see it?
That's better. That's better.
Oh,
well done.
Yeah, I'd rather going into presentation mode. We will just stick with this. So, and apologies for that, everybody. There I was talking away, thinking you could read my slides, and thank you for interrupting, David. So, how does program work? So, we obviously have our access program, and we work with students who have entered through the higher education access route or the disability access route. Both are national programs within the Irish education system, and it's a centralised application process. And we provide each student with additional career and work readiness support, where we place students here at the end of their first and their second years within that programme. So we know we're dealing with young students, 19, 20 years of age, who may not have much experience of the external work market. So we help them get ready for that. We do a lot of support with them. So part of this career support is about enhancing their employability. So the placement is about enhancing employability, their career prospects, and also working on social mobility. Because we know that if you come from an affluent family or a well-connected family, they can help you get a good quality summer internship. But if you're coming from a socially deprived background or where there isn't a history of that high quality work, you don't have those connections to get the summer placements. So that's what we do. And we're helping to address that network grant. So we act as that middle person to help you get the placement. All placements are fully paid. This is a fundamental thing. They must meet the minimum wage in Ireland. And we're proud to say that the vast majority of companies will give significantly above the minimum wage. And as a unit, then I have two staff that work on this, and we have a student-employer matching process. So the employer outlines to us the student they want. We try not to have a competitive interview process. That is not the style of what we're looking at. We try to match rather than put students into a competitive situation. And as I mentioned before, this is hosted by students who, by companies who make a philanthropic donation through the university. So I suppose, what has that meant to us since we started this in 2019? And what has that meant to us? So, taking into mind that 2020 and 21 were COVID years, and we had obviously impacted by that. So since then, we have placed 483 students on placements. We have raised 6.3 million in philanthropic donations, which we use then to fund our students. So it's a very circular effect where basically the students who go out on work placement are funding all their fellow students on the programme in terms of bursaries. We have worked with 100 plus companies in hosting and placing these students. And I suppose another really important part is that it gives the students a good earning opportunity for that summer period. And we know that our students have earned over 2 million euros themselves during this period to help fund their education. So I suppose what makes the programme unique? It's aligned with the United Nations SDG goals. So it aligns with Goal 4, quality education, Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, and Goal 10, reduce inequalities. We've received awards both nationally and internationally for this programme and what we do. And we're about systemic change. We contribute to the ecosystem of societal change as students become agents of change in the labour market and participating workplaces become more culturally diverse. We know this, we've heard this from people. So it's about changing who gets to work where and what these workplaces look like. And as part of that, we've undertaken some evidence-based research using the Centre for Evaluation, Quality and Research. We recently just completed a significant research piece. And it looked at capturing the key outcomes, impacts and challenges of programme shareholders. So basically, the students, the employers and us as a service unit. And the evaluation aimed to provide insights and recommendations to enhance the programme development and long-term sustainability, because ultimately that is what we want. Okay, so the research methodology was informed by the theory of change methodology, and it was with workshops held with stakeholders involved in the programme. And we include the delivery of comprehensive surveys, qualitative research methods, both interviews and focus groups. And we focus on students who are partaken in 2019 to 2022. The reason for that is the students had finished their degrees and were now at least 1 year in employment. So we wanted to know, had this internship made a difference in your earning potential, which was one of the key goals, and was it making a difference to your career? So again, as I mentioned, we were looking at past interns, employers and university staff to see what had happened. So the key research findings we found was the students came back and told us it supports career development, increased confidence in their own abilities. That was something that really came back to us. They said they could see how now their degree was going to work in the workplace. Enhanced networking skills. So in their employment and in their placement, they got to know other people who were in the workplace. And if you're coming from a low income background, you often don't have a chance to work in those networks. And key obviously was a positive postgraduate outcome things. So I think you can see there. So 6 months after graduating, 71% had secured a full-time job directly within the field. A further 13% were working not quite as aligned within their field. And only 3% were still actively looking for work. So for us, that was a very, very positive outcomes as to what that program was. And I suppose for employers, because remember, there's two partners within this. So, what the employers were telling us was it was bringing about significant culture and organizational benefits for participating employers. It contributes to companies' SEG goals and their CSR requirements, the corporate and social relations requirements. And it gave them a pipeline to talented young employees with technical and creative skills to contribute to problem solving. And that was something that we've heard back a lot, was they were really impressed by how good some of these young people were. Young people who often would not get through their standard recruitment mechanisms because AI or would have shadowed them out, or they wouldn't have had the final, we have a leaving certificate, others may have had A levels. They wouldn't have achieved the same academic outcomes. So therefore they were put out. And this was kind of showing our employers that you need to look a little bit wider than just, you need to think a little bit more in depth. And here are, I suppose, a couple of phrases or feedback we got. The program gave me confidence in my own abilities. It allowed me to learn and develop hands-on practical skills working in an office environment and communicating with stakeholders and third-party networks. So that would have been one of our students. And without the program, I wouldn't have been able to set myself up with a solid portfolio that employers were looking for. And I am forever grateful for this experience. And again, from the employer side here, the students brought in new approaches and diverse perspectives. They're also very technically skilled and creative. And I think that's really important for us. And again, many of the students are getting early insights into a career related to their college course, are building a business network through their colleagues, getting coaching and mentoring from peers and seniors. I have every confidence that the interns that we will have absolutely go on to long-term professional employment. And what we're finding is that quite a number of our students were being offered employment within employers a year or two out. So they were basically offering them jobs post-graduation. So they were getting an early look and saying, I'd like you. And they were hiring them in the longer term, which is really important for us. So I suppose, scaling and sustainability, where are we going with this? We want to enhance pre-placement support and expectation management. Some of our students probably have a little bit unrealistic expectations as to what they're going to get out of a short-term internships. And maybe sometimes our employers are forgetting just how young some of the students are and that they're early within their studies. We're developing bespoke training modules for participating employers, and that has come up as a request from employers, particularly around working with neurodivergent. Now, we all know they have neurodivergent people within their workforce, but they often don't recognise that because those people are not publicly stating it. And that is a request from our employers is, can you help us, do this better? We want to develop peer and alumni supports, mentoring and networking for our students who are participating in these programs. And we want quality assurance and program communication. We want to make sure we keep doing this well and keep doing it right. And So I suppose thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me. And I put my email address there on screen. And please, you're very welcome to reach out to me. I can put in the chat later a link to if you want to read a little bit more on our research, on our report. And I hope other people can find this useful and maybe able to look at, the importance of supporting students, not just to get into the degrees, but to thrive and drive beyond their degrees into good, high quality employment. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cathy. And what impresses me about what you've just shared with us is how the sustainability thinking behind that is very closely connected with all the stakeholders involved. And I think that's really smart. And I said we'd take questions at the end, but there is one question in the Q&A which I think relates directly to that. And it asks, how close is the workplace program to becoming self-sustainable in terms of philanthropic funds raised and the bursary support given?
I'm very pleased to announce it is fully self-financing. We are now raising, within 6 years, we are now raising more money than we actually need to disperse to our students. And the next phase will be looking at increasing how much finance we can give our students, because we set a minimum of 800, but we will be looking to increase that to 900 or 1,000, because our aim is not to create a big reserve of funds. We obviously need some rainy day funds, because if anything happens externally in the economy, we have to be ready for that hit. But we're not looking to build up long-term reserve. But it has moved us from a place where the university very much struggled with financing and supporting these students. And as you can imagine, quite a negative conversation going on in the background as to how costly these students were. And I've been very pleased to say we've been able to completely take that off the table now and show that there is no concerns anymore about how the university will finance this thing. But we've also brought other benefits to the university, in that other work placements that are operated across the university, graduate employment. There's been multiple spin-offs that maybe we hadn't quite anticipated. So thank you.
Well, that's fantastic news. And it would not surprise me if you get a number of emails asking you for more details about that.
We would welcome it, thank you.
If I can just make a connection, maybe through WAHEN, you would be happy to share some of the critical elements in achieving that position, because there are a lot of universities around the world who would love to be in your position. So thank you very much.
Whatever we can do, please, thank you. Reach out to us.
Lovely. Well, we go now to Rhodes University, and we have from there Tracy Kitchen and Kelly Vorster, and they're going to talk under the title Access Beyond Admission, Uncovering the Hidden Curriculum for Student Success.
Thank you very much, David. Let me just share my screen quickly. Okay. Is that visible to everyone?
That's clear.
Great. Thank you so much for having us, inviting us here today. As David said, my colleague Kelly and I are from Rhodes University in a very sunny South Africa. And today we reflect on our role within South Africa's post-apartheid transformation mandate and our own institutional development plan. And in doing so, we have to acknowledge a significant victory, which is that the doors of higher education are wider now than they've ever been. So at Rhodes University, we have prioritized physical access and intentionally reshaped our student body to reflect the true diversity of our nation. So today, our lecture halls are filled with students from a huge spectrum of schools and socioeconomic backgrounds. We're increasingly a home to first-generation university goers, so pioneers who arrive with the hopes of their families on their shoulders. And these students are often ones who are navigating a second or a third language and often encountering a computer for the very first time. But we need to be honest with ourselves, and this is something that Cathy indicated a few minutes ago. which is that physical access does not guarantee epistemic belonging. And while we've succeeded in getting students kind of through the door, what we're learning is that a seat in the classroom is not the same as equitable access. So true access is not a singular event at the start of orientation. It's a continuous process. As John said, also going through into the graduate programs. So while it is very important, while it is very important for students to be familiar with what is taught, so what is being taught in the curriculum, we see student success not only as that, but as being given access to what is not explicitly taught. So the unspoken, the invisible rules and the expectations that come with being a university student, and obviously within each specific discipline. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about how these aspects of the hidden curriculum pose challenges to how we think about student success and student access and equity. And importantly, we think about whose responsibility it is to uncover and demystify this aspect of university life.
So what is the hidden curriculum? In every discipline and institution, there are unspoken norms, values, and expectations about what it means to be a student and a member of a disciplinary community. Things that are not taught directly, but are embedded in how we teach, assess, and interact, and how we expect our students to learn, complete tasks, engage with the lecturer and their peers, and navigate the university space. Students are expected to absorb and know these mostly independently. These include, for example, ways of speaking and writing, how to question, challenge, or cite other scholars, what counts as valid knowledge, how knowledge is produced and by whom, and even how to be a student in a way that aligns with the academic and social culture of the university. This is not just about acquiring skills, it's about developing a sense of identity and belonging, becoming someone who is seen as a legitimate, valued member in the academic space. The challenge is that these expectations are largely foreign for students fresh out of school and tend to remain implicit. So why is this a problem? Because these expectations are implicit, students who don't recognize or meet these expectations are often framed as underprepared or lacking. This is evident, for example, when students are told their writing isn't academic, or they don't engage critically, or when they struggle to meet all their deadlines. This is why we encourage reflection on where they are taught what those expectations are and what they mean in practice. So instead of naming the system's opacity, we position the student as the problem. And the consequences of this are real. Students internalize a sense of failure. They start to believe they don't belong or aren't cut out for university, when in fact, what they're experiencing is a kind of exclusion rooted in necessary aspects of being a student remaining implicit and largely unaddressed. So to address this, we've been drawing from the work of Rhodes University colleague, Professor Karen Ellery. The iceberg is an image that illustrates what we're talking about really well. The bottom of the iceberg, the unseen parts, is a necessary part of the visible curriculum. The content, assessments, tasks, tutorials, this is what usually gets addressed and taught. However, the hidden curriculum, which includes the underlying practices, literacies, and ways of being that students need in order to succeed, often remains a blind spot in our teaching. These expectations are embedded in academic culture, but are rarely named or made visible, leaving many students to navigate them without guidance. So things like how to take effective notes, how to work with feedback on assessments, how to structure an argument or approach readings, or even how to send an appropriate email or ask for help. These are not additional peripheral skills. They are an intricate part of what it means to succeed as a student. And when we don't name or teach them, we put students at a disadvantage by not making what is required of them clear and explicit. So what does it look like to make these things more visible? At Rhodes, we've started working with 5 categories of literacies to guide how we support students holistically. It has also given us a way to pull apart what we mean by the hidden curriculum and surface particular areas of support students will need to succeed. These include academic literacies, so things like reading dense texts, citing appropriately and using disciplinary language. These are deeply shaped by the knowledge-making processes and practices of each field. Learning literacies, this is about helping students develop reflective and strategic approaches to learning. How do I plan my time? How do I respond to a difficult mark or revise my approach? This is about what it means to be a student and navigate the academic space. Digital literacies, these include things like navigating our learning platforms, managing online communication, and engaging critically with information online as well. Life literacies, these are often overlooked but essential. How do students take care of their well-being? How do they navigate being far from home or deal with imposter syndrome? And by curriculum literacies, we mean students understanding how their degree actually works. It's about knowing how programs are structured, how modules connect, and how to make informed decisions about their pathway through the degree. I speak now, and what's not included on this slide is also AI literacies, which our university has started working towards as well in making more explicit. Together, these literacies support both academic success and personal growth. In our student development work, we focus primarily on the learning and disciplinary literacies. We recognize that digital and life literacies are as equally important, and we are intentional about working collaboratively with the divisions who do the work, as these 5 literacies are interlinked. The visual highlights our focus on the learning and disciplinary literacies, and more recently curriculum literacies as well, that form part of the hidden curriculum. While we start by acknowledging who our students are and what they bring with them from school as a baseline, we've come to realize that relying on assumptions about this baseline is no longer sufficient. Student contexts, schooling backgrounds, and prior exposure to academic practices shift year by year, and with that, so do their needs. Recognizing the limitations of our existing knowledge, we've begun to actively research what that baseline really looks like in our current context. This work is helping us understand how best to design and develop interventions that surface the hidden curriculum. Ultimately, we want our practices to be informed not by guesswork, but by evidence. It's not simply that students are failing to adapt. It's that the system often fails to make its expectations clear. When we leave key academic and cultural norms unspoken, we risk reducing access to a matter of entry alone, rather than supporting a meaningful experience of full participation and belonging. Success in higher education depends not only on gaining entry, but on whether students can navigate the environment, fully understand what's expected of them, and see themselves as capable and legitimate members of the university community. But the hidden curriculum often falls into a gray area, as Tracy mentioned. It's not always clear who holds responsibility for making it visible or how best to respond. That's precisely why this work can be so easily overlooked. At Rhodes, we've started responding to this by developing intentional interventions that aim to surface the hidden curriculum and better support students in navigating the full landscape of the university life. I'm now going to hand over to Tracy, who will speak more directly to these interventions.
Thank you, Kelly. So at Rhodes University, as Kelly has mentioned, we're very deliberately trying to find ways of identifying these hidden expectations and making them more explicit for our students, so that these expectations can become an integral and normalized part of students' learning experiences. So to date, our efforts have largely focused on academic and learning literacies, as Kelly said, but they also necessarily draw on digital and life literacies as well. And for the very first time this year, we've focused specifically on curriculum literacies, which is very exciting for us. So the first of the initiatives is one that we piloted during orientation week this year, a curriculum advising program that helps incoming students demystify the curriculum requirements before they make their final curriculum choices. We've also piloted a peer advising program, which provides ongoing support to mentors. So one of our most successful programs is what we call the RU Mentoring Program, which is designed to provide learning literacy support to first-year students. This is structured in a group mentoring structure and is accompanied by a mentor companion booklet, which guides peer mentors who are second and third years, so senior students, to make explicit the ways of doing learning at Rhodes University. So students here are supported through activities relating to time management, identifying student support or support structures, test and exam preparation, and really just understanding what it means to be an active, independent, and engaged student. This mentoring program actually continues beyond first year, and our second and third year students receive mentoring support through the Nedana program, which is linked to RU Mentoring. And we realize this continued support is important because the hidden curriculum and the expectations and norms within it, as John Gardner pointed out, changes with every year of study, and it becomes ever more nuanced, and we need to respond to that. So these mentoring programs also draw on a third initiative, the Toolkit series, which provides both learning and discipline-specific academic literacy support. So the toolkits serve as guides for students to understand the hidden norms and practices for specific disciplines. And an example of this is, say, quantitative literacies in the sciences. So knowing how to measure or how to read graphs or how to read a map, as well as for learning in these spaces. So students can access self-contained toolboxes, each of which deal with specific aspect of these discipline-specific literacies. We currently have 4 toolkits in our series. So science, humanities, and education specific, as well as a more general toolkit for learning at university. We're currently also developing toolkits for the commerce and law faculties. Now, while our focus remains largely on students, we also provide targeted support for lecturers and tutors. And these are the people for whom much of the hidden curriculum has actually become common knowledge. So we do this to ensure that our academic staff and tutors can identify those aspects of their teaching that need to be made explicit, and then facilitate ways of communicating this to students. We also provide tutor training to develop ways of making explicit the expectations through facilitation and feedback, which is augmented by a short course in small group facilitation. And this is offered to tutors across disciplines, and we use this to unpack the ways in which tutors can facilitate meaningful and pedagogically sound learning experiences. Now, all of our current interventions are ongoing and are really just intended to shift the culture of learning. So to induct students into the ways of thinking and learning, and to shift the expectations and assumptions that we make about these students. Of course, we also continue to do research in all of these areas. So just to close off, it's really important that we remember that uncovering the hidden curriculum is not an add-on. It's not extra work that should only be done by student support divisions. It really goes to the heart of how students learn, how they belong, and how they succeed. And as a result, all university staff are actually ethically bound to ensuring access to it. So in doing so, we can really take the guesswork out of learning at university and remove a lot of the barriers to student success, hopefully eventually ensuring real equitable access to knowledge. And in talking about the systems and the assumptions and the silences that shapes who thrives at university, we come to acknowledge that learning goes beyond just accessing academic knowledge. It includes the social, cultural, and personal, and requires a true sense of belonging. Thank you very much. We look forward to engaging with you.
Well, thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you, Kelly, too. You said some really important things there, and one of them actually links with something which is important to us in Magna Carta, and that is universities being clear about their values and sharing those values with students, so all are aware, and the place can become stronger as a result. And you've made a very strong pitch for addressing the skills needs very sensitively, which I think is hugely important for all students, wherever they start or continue their journey. But we may have time to return to some of those issues, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
In concluding our trip around the world, we come back to Munster, to Ireland, and to Barry O'Connor, President Emeritus of Munster Technological University. And Barry is going to talk about the Global Forum for Student Success.
Okay, can I just check that I'm sharing effectively there yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Okay. Let's see if I can get back out of that. Oh,
Now you are.
oh, good. Okay. Right. So good afternoon, David and colleagues. And first of all, if I can go back up this one on my in presentation mode. I am.
You are.
Good.
Not
All
you're
good.
not actually.
I'm not. Okay.
You hit the screen at the bottom.
I'll try that.
That's it. That's the place.
Oh, good. Okay. So first of all, apologies from my three colleagues, Drew, Kosh, Emily McIntosh, and then Tabby, all of whom send their apologies, but for various reasons and some pretty serious reasons cannot make it today, which as part of a health warning, I can say as well, it made me having to resort to a slide presentation. And the health warning is these slides were not made with the help of AI, as will become obvious. So just starting off, I basically want to give you a taster, a flavour of what we are doing in the Global Forum for Student Success, which I think does parallel in many respects with the work that's going on at WAHEN, and has a lot of synergies with the presentations we've just seen today. So basically, through the good inspiration of my good colleague and friend John Gardner, who opened today's session, we were established in 2020 in the middle of COVID, I guess, having had a very successful European First Year Experience Conference in Cork here in Ireland. We were planning to develop further at the 2020 EYFE. Everything came to a halt. So then we decided we'd try and keep the momentum going. And basically we were 24 of us, including John and Peter Felton and other great colleagues, spreading across 6 continents and 10 different countries, decided to launch this online forum on student success. And we can see there the countries: Australia, Canada, England, Scotland. Okay, awarding Scotland its own nationality.
Except we can't, Barry, because you're on your opening slide, and you've not gone over to presentation. Now you are, but you're not in presentation mode.
But at least you can read it, so I think I leave it at that, Dave, to be safe for you.
That's fine.
I don't have the benefit of AI, as I say. So 24 scholars, leaders, and students across 6 continents, 10 countries, and we also had other people involved as well from Colombia and some other countries. So through the good work of my friend John Gardner, as I say there at the bottom, coming soon is the rubric for expanded membership or contributors to join with us in the Global Forum. And one of the foci that I kind of push all the time is maybe we should establish working groups to deliver product, as I would say, and then job and finish. So I'm going to stick with this. So one of the first working groups we set up was to define the mission and vision of the forum, and that was work coordinated by Tabby and myself. And maybe just to give the early conclusion from that work, there was a huge canvas of what we could do, what we should do, what we might do. And as ever, you cannot be all things to all men. So we kind of developed one of the key aims was to get student success as part of the conversation, get it on the agenda for educators and politicians alike. And again, that is the question then, the audience. Are they faculty, are they learners, are they policymakers, or whatever? Just a small note, we were established during COVID in COVID, teaching and learning went all online, and everybody bemoaned the fact that the student experience was missing out. But post-COVID, the student experience wasn't really funded as well as it should have been, because there were other economic issues came in, and this is why we say student success, access and success should be part of the central agenda. We also looked at the fact that, you know, whatever we're doing should have a scholarly base, should have strategic implications, but also should be practical for faculty and learners across the globe who need support in this. So very briefly then, just to scoot through our mission, and it's there on the screen, but effectively it's to promote effective student success policy, practice and research across international context. So to promote the whole idea of student success. And again, just a footnote on that, as everybody would know, there is very little osmosis, very little transfer between universities, very little transfer between faculties, between engineering and arts faculties, between institutions and other institutions in the same country. So it's to promote that. So the vision, as we saw it then, was to create a dynamic movement of stakeholders, again, to promote, as has been mentioned through Cathy's contribution there, John's and our colleagues in Rhodes University. It's about equitable and accessible success, should be equitably accessible to all students. And indeed, I highlighted the word learner there, because that was one of the discussions we had. Is it just students or learners? Because students are those in college, learners tend to be the lifelong learning cohort, which, as UNESCO says, is a human right. And again, really struck by Cathy's presentation there, was chimed with us as well, that it's the success of the individual learner throughout their lifespan, which includes the post-graduation success for beneficial employability. And I thought the evidence Cathy proposed there was very, very interesting about the starting salaries for people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds when they tick the box and get the degree and so on. And obviously the other key issue, selling point for student success, is the whole idea of promoting societal and active citizenry for all learners, all graduates. So moving quickly along then, just give a very brief example of one of the products that we've developed. This is a curated database of resources that is free online to be accessed by people involved in student success, whether it's on the student success or higher education frameworks, strategic planning or policy, practice-oriented collections, toolkits, sorts of some of the examples there given by our colleagues in Rhodes. And again, the whole idea behind this is, and this is a database hosted on graciously by the Gardner Institute, which was established by John, but it should be user-driven, dynamic, and the key point to it is curated. It's not just a Google search. It is contributions that are put up there by colleagues, and just give it what it looks like there. And as well as the contribution, there's the reason why this is recommended. You know, so you already have a critique there to see is it worth looking further into this. That's available as an example on the Gardner website. Moving very quickly along, Dr. Emily McIntosh, who is now Chief Student Officer in Harper Adams University in Shropshire in the UK, with our colleagues in the working group number 2, did a lot of work on what is student success, what is the term, what does it mean, what is the typology of student success, because it means different things to different people in different countries, in different contexts, in different languages even. And again, that work then led to a very detailed literature review by Johan Gersma and colleagues in Singapore to develop this whole idea of defining what student success is and what the words mean, because they mean different things in different places. Moving quickly along, that then has developed further into what we call the Global Forum Interview Project, where structured, detailed interviews have been conducted with members of the forum and other people, 13 have been completed so far, about student success initiatives, student success strategies, what they mean in their experience, what practices are being implemented in different countries, different universities, different contexts. The analysis of that is underway, and it will be published on our Global Forum website. We're also looking at the idea then of delving deeper into some webinars or some podcasts on common themes that emerge, be it different colleagues in Singapore or Ireland or Scotland or even, dare I say it, the US. So that's coming down the tracks. The next part of our function, I suppose, is to act as a test bed for various strategies or policies that might go towards improving student success on a global basis. And one of those is extremely important, has been developed again by Dr. Drew Kosh, who is CEO of the Gardner Institute, and it is the implementation of the 6 global design principles for student success. In other words, how do you assess how committed or effective your institution is to student success? Or if it's not, how do you move along that pathway? So we've been working on this since 2022, led by Drew. We've already done some pilot work in 6 countries: Canada, States, Ireland, and Scotland. And again, there are 4 assumptions based, that set the baseline, if you like, for an institution being committed to student success. First of all, that the academic mission is preeminent in the university. Second of all, the fact is that to admit that the rate of success are unacceptably low for certain cohorts, and this is an ongoing issue across the globe. The institution, to be part of these principles, to be recognised in the context as committed to the equity, the institutions must be committed to change, to eliminate inequitable outcomes. And again, going back to some of the previous contributions, the institution, and this goes back to what John was talking about, the postgraduate experience, must be committed to the continuous use of evidence. In other words, to collect the data that will stand up whether you're actually doing the business or not when it comes to equity of success. The principles themselves, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. So the 6 principles, again, the philosophy and the strategic alignment must be there. The institution must be committed as a top priority to excellence in teaching and learning. And we know that the whole drive for most universities nowadays is research funding and publications and so on. So the institute must be committed to teaching and learning. No, they're not mutually exclusive, research and teaching and learning. Again, the institution must be designed for student opportunity and equitable attainment for all. Institutional leadership must be developed at all levels, from students right up to provost, vice chancellor, president, or whatever. And the organisation and policy of the institution must be committed to this. And again, number 6, data, or data as we say, depending what part of the globe you're in, data and accountability and the commitment to continuous improvement must be central to the operations of the university, if it's a university that is committed to student success. Now, as I said, Drew Kosh has pioneered this particular development, and he has presented at a number of international conferences and will do a much better presentation than I would on this. The next phase in this is expanded global reach. We're looking to develop this in at least another 5 countries. From the institutional point of view, the institute must be committed to follow the principles and see how they can be implemented, or 1 or 2 of the principles. The good side is the support model is that the team behind it will actually support the institution, give them feedback on how they're doing or how they can do better. And the good news is it's pro bono. There are no fees, but they will be well supported by the Gardner Institute in developing these principles and implementing them, because they're not the finished article. because it's a constant loop there. So finally, there'll be there is a book in the offing on this, and the institutional contributions will be inserted in the book as case studies. If you're interested, and we'd really like to hear from colleagues in this, please contact Drew Kosh at the Gardner Institute, and it would be great. We're not going for 20 or 30 sort of pilot cases. We're just looking for 5 or 6 at this point to do in-depth work and to refine the principles even more. So finally, if you need further information on the Global Forum for Student Success, you can ask John Gardner, or you can look up the Global Forum's website, which is graciously hosted at the minute by the Gardner Institute. And if you have any specific queries on today, you can send them on to me there at barryo'connormail@gmail.com if you have any specific queries about today. So thanks again for listening and for watching, and hopefully I've given you some ideas as to what we're doing in the Global Forum for Student Success as an online community meeting once a month, and again developing the database, implementing those principles, connecting with people, and sharing our expertise across the forum and beyond. So thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you, Barry, for sharing that. And you too raised some quite fundamental points. But what I want to do now, we've had 3 questions put by our viewers. And one of them, John, you have answered online. And that was the question, how does the data or tracking of postgraduate students compare to undergraduate students? You have put some text online. Is there, so that's information for colleagues who haven't been looking at the Q&A, that the answer is up there. Is there anything, John, you would like to add? And is there anything that the anonymous questioner who put the question would like to come back to you on?
So you're trying to out somebody? Is that permissible by the WAHEN
Of course
rule?
it is. Of course it is. Only when it's helpful, though.
Okay. Well, do you want to see if the questioner has anything to add before I respond?
Let's invite the questioner to put something else in the Q&A if he does. And let's, for the time being, go to the second question, which does have a name. Cami, I'll get it wrong. Camagello, who thanks you and says, how can we have practically support graduate students? How can we practically support graduate students similar to undergraduate students, and considering the experience of previously excluded students in higher education? What are your thoughts on that?
Are you turning this over to the whole group, or is that a
No,
question?
I'm turning it over to you in the first instance because it's addressed to you.
All right. Well, I think at the risk of some oversimplification, all of your institutions, I can gather, certainly from this session today, you have services, resources, helping people in place to support undergraduates. Okay. But the system that's been designed is to exclude graduate students from those forms of assistance. At least that's the case in my country. And, that structure didn't come from Moses. Okay. We humans created that. We could create alternative structures whereby we made accessible these services and resources to graduate students. But we would have to have the will to do that. And in order to get there, educators have to talk about a very fundamental question. This seems so ridiculous. It's so fundamental, but it's not asked. And that is, what are the needs of graduate students? What do we know about that? And who is even remotely attempting to meet these needs? And with what success? And then, the corollary is, what are the unmet needs? And this whole question of how do we pay more attention to the holistic needs of graduate students is exactly the same kind of question that, thank goodness, we've begun asking all over the world with respect to undergraduate students. But we educators, we have to come together and talk about this. And unfortunately, when we talk about our challenges, we differentiate between undergraduate and graduate. And I think that's a very arbitrary and misleading distinction. So my response would be, we use a phrase in the United States that when we use it, everybody's blood pressure goes up. And the phrase is self-study. And for our compliance agencies, what do you call these in the rest of the world? Assurance agencies, the quality assurers that largely your countries provide through government regulation and oversight. They require you to report on what you're doing and what you're not doing, and to show your evidence. And we call that a self-study. And so, I'm arguing that universities need to do a thorough self-study of these related questions. And you need to get people who want to be involved in such a conversation and the influentials. And the influentials are not only the administrators, but the influentials are the esteemed members of the professoriate who have become accustomed to doing things for 1,000 years the same way. And one of the biggest differences between graduate and undergraduate education is that graduate education is overwhelmingly faculty focused. Okay, the faculty have enormous autonomy and control over what happens to their graduate students. That's not exactly the same in undergraduate education. So at the risk of some simplification, you need some kind of study process that's collegial and gets your faculty, administrators, staff, and students, if you were to involve your students in these conversations, real-time focus groups, as well as doing some surveying. Students like to tell their stories. They want to know that people care about me. They're even asking about me. David, I better stop.
No, it's very interesting, and it is different in different countries.
It is.
But one of the places I started from in the United Kingdom was adult education, people coming in from a whole range of jobs in an evening to do something to improve them, and involvement with the Open University and so on as well. And I think one of the things that I get from that is that it is so very different because students are bringing so much experience into the classes. And the challenge for you as the facilitator teacher is how do you use that experience whilst continuing to achieve the objectives of the program. So I think it's a challenge to do, but it's a good thing.
Well, you have to talk about it. There has to be more focus on the student experience rather than on the administrative and financial and other aspects. And we found that the movement really didn't get moving with respect to first-year students and student success until there were things written about it, publishing, research. And I did my first book on the first-year experience in the late 80s. And that had a huge impact because more people can read about something than will ever come to a meeting to talk about it. And so what I'm trying to do now is to stimulate the beginnings of a written literature about the graduate student experience. And that will help significantly, I believe, because there are many cross-cultural applications.
Okay. I want to go to another question now, which I think is important around the world, and come back to that document, Magna Charta Universitatem. The big difference between the 2020 revision and the 1988 original version was much more emphasis was given to students serving society. And how do you actually do that if you don't connect with the society? And what we've seen, I think, from Dublin in particular, is connections have been made. Not only have they been made, they've been effectively made, and it's resulted in resources coming in, which has made their whole program sustainable. But we have a question, thinking on the work from Dublin, how important is it to build networks and partnerships with external organizations to keep access programs active? And my simple answer would be it is hugely important. But Cathy, you might like to add a little bit more substance to that answer.
Thank you. And David, I think, as you very rightly said, we cannot function as an access program if we haven't got wider involvement with stakeholders. And I think that starts before the student even comes into us. It starts with our outreach work, where we're linking up with employers, we're linking up with the community, we're linking up with schools. So we're inviting and encouraging students in. And part of that promise we make students when they come in is that they will be looked after when they're in here, that they will be supported, and that there will be a good outcome for them. If someone from a disadvantaged background is basically putting their earnings potential on hold for 3 or 4 years, there's an unspoken agreement there that there is a significant payback with this third level education. And I think there's an onus on us as institutions to deliver on that promise in whatever way that we can. And that involves us doing it while they're here. So it's not just this big final, wait till the final year and we'll all get this sorted for you. But it's that under promise that when they come in. And we have seen through our work that I mentioned a work readiness program. And part of that is we work with students around building their CV, their ability to do interviews. And we have heard anecdotal evidence of them taking them skills home into the family home and sharing their expertise on how to write a CV and how to do interview, so that other members of the family are upskilling. They're going searching for new jobs based on what we have given them. But it's also, you're delivering that unspoken promise. And I remember one of the phrases we got back through some of our research was a parent saying, and it was a student who just got out in second year, I didn't expect to see them benefiting so quickly and so early. So that's the pull factor for the younger siblings. It's like the older brother, the older sister, look how well they're doing. You should follow them. So I think we can only do that if we're delivering our promise, which we have to do with our stakeholders. And our employers are essential. But we also have to educate our employers that they can't just pick from one pool of people, that there is a diversity among our student population, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's socioeconomic background. And that, one of our other speakers referred a lot to AI, and AI is our challenge in that we want to make sure that it doesn't screen out the very people we work and we want to support. So yes. So sorry, a very long-winded answer to that.
No, very, very helpful answer. I think the place I'd like to finish is to come back to this point of engaging properly and fully and effectively with our students. And I'm just wondering if I can go around all of you and just give you a couple of sentences, maybe to share hints and tips, things that have worked for you in engaging with students. Cathy, you put something into your last answer about that. Is there anything you would like to add? And then I'll just go around the screen and then we will finish.
I think we have to have an honesty, an openness, and honesty, and an integrity in what we're doing, so that it's not just words that we use, and students will see through you if you're not open and honest. And so I keep saying this unspoken promise that we make students in terms of what they forfeit when they come into third level education, and there's an onus on us to support students. And what I have found is that if we do this right, the word goes out among the student community themselves and they become your best ambassador.
Indeed they do. Barry, what would be your words of wisdom?
Well, David, they may not be my words of wisdom, but we did make great use of the Scottish Sparks initiative, which was it started out, I think, as Scottish Student Partnership and Academic Quality, right? But they changed the P from partnership to participation. And they put their focus on training students, class representatives, members of Students' Union, who in our system all get to sit on on boards of governors and so on, and various committees across the university, that their students, no more than any of us, if we join any committee, you're there at least a year before you recognize people's names or whatever. So the Sparks initiative helped us to train students up to hit the ground. I won't say running, but hit the ground as good as possible when they started out. Could I just jump in on one small point on the postgraduate experience there, David? Wasn't it that we found worked very well that there's a difference of opinion as to whether, in terms of who's responsible for graduate students, is it the vice president for research, or is it the vice president for academic affairs? And to my way of thinking, it should be the latter, because the vice president for research's main goal, one of his or her main goals, is to raise finance. The VP for academic affairs responsibility is academic quality and the student experience. So I think if you have VP for academic affairs, registrar, responsible for the postgraduate work as well, then you're in a much better place from the point of view of the student and the academic work. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Barry. John, your last thoughts.
Well, I'm recalling the immortal words of my first mentor in higher education, who was a university president, for whom the students staged what we used to call a sit-in. They barricaded him in his office for 24 hours, and he emerged and he held a press conference. And he gave a wonderful piece of advice, which I try to practice. He thanked the students for giving him what he called an extended opportunity for reflecting on the meaning of student behavior. And what I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of assumptions about what students are experiencing, but we rarely check out those assumptions. And until we interact with them and talk with them, no, not email, not yet, you've got to talk to students. They've got to have real interpersonal contact that acknowledges and affirms them. And I had an assumption of mine just blown out of the water recently when I learned that the biggest problem that students had on a particular campus was their drinking water. It never occurred to me that in a developed nation, you could find any place where students couldn't drink the water. And they couldn't because this was in Kentucky, where the groundwater is polluted by the coal industry. And I would never have put drinking water on a list of student challenges. But we have to communicate with our students, and we're not doing a very good job of it.
Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Tracy.
I think firstly that John would be very surprised if he came to South Africa, where we have no drinking water and lots of electricity issues, but that's beside the point.
Sure.
I think for us, what's really important is that we see students as partners. Students are aware that if we bring them into committee meetings and we just pay lip service to what they're saying, that's not good enough. We need our students as partners. We need them to be part of the decision-making process. As John was saying, we can't decide for them what their issues are. So we really need to find ways of getting them involved in the processes.
Thank you very much. And finally, Kelly.
Thank you. Tracy took the words out of my mouth, but I just wanted to say it's what we do is not for students, it's that we do it with students. I think that's essential, and to recognize that students are whole people who come with knowledge that we don't have, who can think and act and have agency, and really just to use that kind of value in collaboration, as Tracy was talking about, to recognize it is a reciprocal relationship. We learn as much from them as they do from us. And even saying us and them, I don't like that kind of language, but yeah, it is. We are all part of the university. It's not the university and students. Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's lovely. We do, in fact, linking with your remarks, have a power outage to thank for this webinar existing at all, because some of us were down in Cape Town when these presentations should have taken place as streams of the World Access to Higher Education Day, and a power outage prevented us from doing it. But our loss on that day is our gain today. And I would like to conclude by doing two things really.